Imagine your loved one murdered by a member of society, and you have the option to punish them. How would you want them punished? Would you want to get revenge, or would you want it to be fair and have a trial? The death penalty is a highly controversial subject, and society believes in both sides. As of 2016, there are 19 states without the death penalty, and Wisconsin is one of them. I have researched both sides of this argument, and I have heard from experts in the crime and justice field and many researchers that have been researching this for many years. Unfortunately, death is a part of life. While you may not personally know anyone that has been murdered, as a part of our society, you should have a say in what justice means, whether it means that the bad guy rots in jail or that he gets sentenced to death. I am here today to inform you of the different pros and cons to the use of the death penalty in cases of murder, torture, and rape. I hope that by the end of my speech, you will be more knowledgeable on this argument. Now that you know why we are here today, I would like to start by informing you of the pros of the death penalty. There are many arguments that people have to explain why the death penalty should be legalized. I will focus on three main points. First, that the death penalty deters crimes, that the death penalty is a legal and acceptable form of punishment, and that it can stop a serial killer from killing again. For my first point, the use of the death penalty is beneficial to everyone if it stops future crime. The use of the death penalty can be used to deter citizens from committing crimes. David Mulhausen is a leading expert on criminal justice programs in the Heritage Foundation Centers on Criminal Justice Program, or for the data analysis, and in his article, How the Death Penalty Saves Lives, he states that in 2009, researchers found that adopting state laws allowing defendants in child murder cases to be eligible for the death penalty was associated with an almost 20% reduction in rates of these crimes. There are consistently facts that show that the death penalty reduces the amount of crimes. You might be thinking, how can something that reduces so much crime be such a bad thing? I wouldn't suggest picking a side until you hear both sides of this argument. Mulhausen also found a study done by Kenneth Land of Duke University and other researchers who researched executions in Texas from 1994 to 2005, and they found that each execution was associated with a decrease of up to 2.5 murders. My second point is that the death penalty is a just punishment. Mulhausen tells readers in his article, How the Death Penalty Saves Lives, that there are crimes out there that have need of strict penalties, and that most Americans recognize this as just. In a direct quote, he states, 61% of Americans view the death penalty as morally acceptable. Andrea Lyon, a death penalty defense lawyer and author of the book The Death Penalty, What's Keeping It Alive? In her book, she states that in 1958, the Supreme Court was challenged multiple times legally for the death penalty. In the Trope versus Jules case, the Supreme Court stated that when the Eighth Amendment was written, the death penalty was seen as an acceptable form of punishment. If they did not see it as cruel and unusual back then, why should we now? My third point is that the death penalty can prevent murderers from getting out of jail and can stop brutal prison murders. Jeffrey Dahmer killed, dismembered, and raped 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. In 1994, he was brutally murdered in prison. Imagine if he was not killed in prison and somehow he was let out. Imagine all the lives that could have been saved if Wisconsin had had the death penalty. Imagine how much money taxpayers would save to not have him sit in jail. If the death penalty had been legalized in Wisconsin during his trial, and he had been sentenced to death, he would have at least died in a humane way. If used correctly and decently, the death penalty is an acceptable alternative to prison life. We have seen that it deters crime, that America believes it is a just punishment, and that it can prevent murderers from getting out of jail or stop them from being brutally murdered. Keeping these points in mind, let's move on to the cons of the death penalty. While there are many pros to using the death penalty for murderers, there are also a list of concerns for legalizing the death penalty. The problem is, who gets to judge whether the death penalty is humane or not? The biggest concerns of those who are against legalizing the death penalty are that the death penalty methods are inhumane, the death penalty causes a racial problem, and that lastly, the death penalty is more expensive than life in prison. For my first point, I found an interview from Steve Inskeep from NPR, who interviewed Austin Surratt, author of the book Gruesome Spectacles, Botched Executions, and America's Death Penalty. The interview took place because of a 2014 lethal injection that took over 2 hours for the man to die. Surratt has researched every execution between 1890 and 2010 and found that there are more failed lethal injections than any other execution method out there. He believes that there is not a safe, effective, reliable, or humane way of execution. If there is no humane way, why is it legal? After World War I, the use of the death penalty increased, while after World War II, the use of the death penalty decreased. The number of executions from 1940 to 1970 dropped drastically, but directly quoted from Andrea Lyon's book, African Americans comprise a disproportional share of those executed. It has been noticed that African Americans are more often subjected to the death penalty than any other race. How is this fair? My third point is that the death penalty is more expensive than that of life in prison. I found an article by John Dieter, who is an executive director for the Death Penalty Information Center. While it is difficult to put actual numbers on the total cost, there is a report from California that shows that the state spent $137 million per year on the death penalty, and that they estimated that if those same inmates who were killed had been given life in prison instead, it would have only cost them $11.5 million per year. We have seen that those who oppose the death penalty have done extensive research to explain why there is no reason for our society to allow the legalization of the death penalty. It's inhumane, costly, and it is used unjustly. There are two sides to every argument, and now you have heard of both sides of this argument. In conclusion, you have seen just how controversial this subject is and why it is so. Some people argue that sentencing murderers to death decreases the amount of murders, that it is an acceptable punishment, and that it is an alternative to brutal prison murders. Those who oppose the death penalty believe that it is too costly, it's used unjustly, and that it is quite inhumane. Now that you have heard of both sides, I hope you understand why this is such an important issue to society. We have all seen movies with superheroes punishing the bad guys. In The Green Arrow, he originally kills all his enemies, but he is later persuaded to hand them over to the police instead. We all wish to live in a world without crime, punishment, or suffering. Unfortunately, until more research is done, we are not sure how to end this crime.